told, and that my head had been shaved. I was fed intravenously because I couldn't suck from a bottle. And I also knew that a lot of nurses took care of me in ways that they were told not to. They gave me a name. They named me Katie Rose because they felt so bad that nobody wanted me and that I didn't have a name. So they named me, they knitted me clothing. They fed me from a bottle when they were told not to. Because when you ask them, they'll say, we knew you could do it. Darn right. And my husband's learned that along the way too. He entered this marriage knowing full well that he was marrying somebody who's a fighter. And I love when my mom tells a story about how the first time they saw me in the incubator and I had all of the tubes, and she said, the minute I saw you, I loved you. And the minute I held you, I knew that you were going to be okay. That's what this movement is all about. It is about changing laws and changing people's minds, but it's also about love and about touching people's hearts and putting a face to these unborn children and their parents and the rest of their families that kind of remain these faceless, nameless beings. And so even though I'd always known that I was adopted, and that was a great thing in our family, very normal, my youngest brother, he's about 7 years younger than I am, is my parents' biological son. He's the odd man out in our family. And he'll tell you that. We thought our parents were crazy for finally having a biological child, because we had a good thing going on as an adopted family. We accept him now. But our joke, and it's not a good pro-life joke because every child is wanted, but I used to say to him when I was younger, I said, they chose me, they had you. It's not appropriate when we say every child is wanted, but you all get it, right? It's brother-sister jokes. But I finally found out when I was about 14 years old that I had survived a failed abortion attempt. And, I got to tell all the teens in this room, I am so proud of you, and I respect and admire you so much. Because when I was about your age, even though I knew in my heart that I was pro-life, there was still this part of me that thought it should be a woman's right to choose, even though I knew that I wouldn't want that for myself or anybody else. And what happened is my older sister became pregnant as a high school student, and she was planning on having an abortion, and so my adoptive parents told her about my survival in the hopes that she would make the right decision for herself and her child. And my sister and I used to fight like cats and dogs. We are two just totally different people. If she was in this room, she would tell you that. And so we were fighting that night, and I can't even remember what it was about. And in the middle of our argument, she spun around and she pointed at me and she said, at least my parents wanted me. Yeah, I hear somebody laugh, right? Thinking, we're both adopted, your parents wanted you more than mine. So being 14 years old, I was ready to spin around and say something that I probably would have regretted, but I know the Lord gave me silence that night. Because when I spun around to say something back to her, my sister's face just fell and she said, you don't know, do you? No. So we kind of bantered back and forth and she said, just wait up for Mom tonight, you'll see. And I had the pit of fear in my stomach because it was not like my sister to leave me alone in the middle of a fight. She would have went after me. So I knew that something pretty big was going on, and so I waited up for my mom. And to be honest, I can't even remember where my father was that night, but I think this is just the way it was all supposed to roll out. And so I waited up for my mom, and I told her about the argument with my sister, and her face fell. I knew something must be big. And my mom just proceeded. She came right out and said, Melissa, we just always thought you knew. Okay? And I waited, and she said, please know that we love you. We never meant to keep this from you, but there's just been no easy way to tell you. And so she came out and said, Melissa, your mother had an abortion during her 5th month of pregnancy with you, and you survived it. Talk about knocking the wind right out of the end of your soul. I can honestly tell all of you I was every single feeling you could ever feel in that one moment of time. I was angry and scared, embarrassed, sad, confused, Everything. Everything that I'd ever believed about myself or had ever known was suddenly all gone, and I wasn't sure who I was anymore. And, you know, I was blessed with a wonderful Christian supportive family who was there for me. I was getting confirmed that year at church, and my confirmation class was incredibly supportive to me. And overall, my church, my school community absolutely loved me for who I was. But I wasn't that upfront with the whole world about who I was, because it was very fearful for me, because I didn't even know what I believed about myself anymore, and I had never heard of anybody like me before. I felt very different for a very long time. When I was 19, I went away to college with all the hopes and dreams of becoming a lawyer and taking charge of Washington and fighting for children like myself. And to make a long story short, I had some really tough experiences on my college campuses of people, not explicitly but implicitly, making it clear that I should not be pro-life. I even had somebody once who said, you know, Melissa, just because this happened to you doesn't mean you have to be pro-life. That's easy to say when your mother chose life. And that goes on and on today. But I'm grateful that I've taken the path that I have been led on in my life. I ended up graduating with a degree in education, Spanish, and English, and I taught high school for a little while, and then I got into counseling and I fell in love with it. And I ultimately got my master's degree, and I'm blessed to work with families every single day. But about the time I started college, I started searching for my biological family, because even though I had known a lot about them, even from, you know, my youngest years, I felt really driven to find them. And even though I knew in my heart that someday I would come forward with my story, I couldn't do it until I had tried to make some kind of contact with them, because I couldn't imagine how traumatic it would be for them to start seeing me or hear about me and knowing that it was really about them. And so I started looking when I was 19 years old, was back in the late 90s. I didn't find them until 2007. And I did everything right. I mean, everything in those 10 plus years that I ever could have done. All the things they tell you to do. And in that time, I was also trying to obtain my birth records. And I was denied that I was ever born. Multiple times. Yeah, I know, right? I guess they were talking semantics. Technically, I wasn't born, if they want to get that literally. But it wasn't until 2007 that I finally got my birth records. And included in those birth records,